Hey everybody, welcome to this Friday. Um, and what's next? Well, we have a new assignment that I'm going to post after I post this video. Um, it is the winning assignment, and several of you chose it actually. It's which means that you get a full grade, extra credit on this particular assignment. And what I chose was not necessarily, be honest with you, it wasn't necessarily the most topical thing. There's not a real lot of breaking news events going on at Rutgers right now. I mean, like when they raised tuition 6%, that sort of thing, it was pretty easy to come up with an idea, and that was clearly the best idea. Sometimes it's maybe best to pick the best and most practical idea, and actually even maybe even the most popular idea. And I actually chose the idea that was chosen by the most people. Okay. Um, because I just felt like, okay, well, if 6 or 7 or 8, and I haven't actually done all the counting yet. People actually like pick this idea. It must be popular. It must be something that's kind of chronic. Sometimes they pick like a chronic idea. I mean, housing has been a situation that's been a problem for a long time, and I even wrote stories about it for the Daily Target when I was a student. But that is the idea, and the idea is a reaction to the housing situation at Rutgers, not just on campus but off campus. Getting a place to live that's near the campus. I realize some of you probably commute, but I'm hoping that those who are dealing with the on campus and off campus will contribute to the discussion point, or maybe you have friends who do the same, who are also dealing with the same situation. So let's see here. Let's go to this. I'm going to do the share the screen. Okay, so all right. So anyway, um, what is our idea? That's actually the discussion point. Okay. Um, so this will be, like I said, posted after I post this morning on the on the on sorry, after I post this lecture. Okay. So third assignment. So this is our third assignment. So remember our first assignment was a profile assignment. The second assignment was actually the worksheets assignment, which is actually due today. Okay. At the end of today. And then this will be our third assignment, which will be due a week from today. Okay. The third assignment, 2020, summer 2025, Rutgers students' reaction to getting housing on or off campus. And this actually can not just include like actually getting, actually, I probably should like maybe remove the word getting because I want this not just to be about, I want to leave this little open-ended. Um, okay, student reaction to housing. I want this to be something that deals with essentially like, also, it's hard to get housing. Yes, that's an issue. It's hard to get housing outside of the university. It's off campus, but also once you get the housing, sometimes it's hard to deal with that housing. So, um, I mean, that was actually the story I did when I was actually at Rutgers was about the condition of the Rutgers housing and how there was mold in a lot of the places that didn't, where there didn't need to be mold. Let's put it that way. That's terrible for people's allergies, terrible for people's breathing. So anyway, so there's our story. Please do a story that answers the question, and congratulations to those. You will be get extra credit. I'll be notifying you all soon of who got it. Okay. Please get student reaction to housing on or off campus. This proved to be a popular idea in your suggestions, so I'm going with a popular opinion this time around. Okay. I have created a discussion point to help provide substance for your story. Um, okay, now let me actually just check one thing that I may have misspoke about. If you can give me 1 second. Yes, remember this was actually this will be shutting down, but ideas for the next assignments. Um, great hire, right? Okay, so it is a great hire. Okay. So anyway, this also is a class participation assignment, so those who didn't actually contribute, well, that'll probably be affect your final grade. Okay. Because this is actually one of those rare times when we actually do have direct class participation. But anyway, let's see here. So you'll be getting a grade higher. Okay. Um, I have actually just kind of lost my place here. I'm sorry about that. Anyway, here we are. Okay. All right. Congratulations. I mean, again, this is all about thinking for yourself. This is all kind of centered around the whole idea of like crafting a lead, and the lead is the main idea of the story. And when you're actually thinking of ideas for a story, you're thinking of essentially of a lead. What would your first sentence be? Okay. And that first sentence should answer the question what this story is about. Now, I realize I might have a few international students here, but anybody else for that matter. This is where the discussion point I posted is going to be incredibly important. I'm going to need all my students to participate in this and provide feedback on the discussion points since not everybody is on campus or even near the campus to write the story. So please see the discussion point and please provide an opinion or and an anecdote, which I'll talk about today. Remember that uh, this part is part of your class participation grade. So what you're going to do is, yeah, I'm going to remove that word getting, because I just don't like it. Okay. Um, so anyway, because it's with housing on or off campus, or perhaps it's about, okay. All right. Anyway, so I want to be more about that. I want to leave it more open-ended. Okay. Um, it's a situation that's like actually I said been a chronic problem for the route. And it's not just about the matter of actually obtaining the housing, which is difficult in itself. All right, so what you need to do is so this is where we kind of expand things out. I've had you do stories where you essentially have interviewed one person or something. Okay. So now I want you actually to interview several people. Okay. And why are we like going about this so gradually? Because that is actually a lot more difficult is to try to budget people into a story, give them enough space, give them enough to say, okay, and trying to balance those opinions with other opinions, okay, trying to provide the most balanced story possible, okay. So you interview 3 to 5 students. I would go closer to five, okay, and that and like I say in a video, outside of the discussion point, let me know if you need help getting students, okay. So maybe you feel like you're not quite satisfied with what's coming out of the discussion point, I mean, maybe I can help you with that, or even at least the very least encourage more people to contribute to the discussion point. I have created a discussion point that'll also be posted after this video. That will help provide answers to this question. Participation and that will count toward your class participation grade. Now, by the way, I say like 3 to 5, but really probably I like to say probably the best kind of reaction story with a 500 word story is like getting like 3. I like to say that kind of breaks the tie. What you're trying to do is you're trying to get like a consensus opinion. This is not a poll, by the way. I've had people kind of confuse this with being a poll. It's not a poll, it's not a survey. What it is it just provides some sort of a cutout or glimpse of how people feel about the housing situation at Rutgers on or off campus. Okay. You could very easily write a story. They do this sometimes. They write stories that are point and counterpoint, pro and con, where you're taking like a slice of people out of the population and getting and voicing their feelings. It doesn't necessarily have to be a majority opinion. It could be a minority opinion. I mean, there's a lot of I like to say the good thing about journalism is that it gives voice to the voiceless. Okay, so you might have a majority opinion you feel about a certain thing, but then maybe there's a certain faction on campus that feels differently, okay? And they should be given the right to voice their opinions too. So what I'm trying to say is you're not trying to find like a necessarily like the most perfect survey or something like that, or even a survey. You're just trying to get like a cutout or a carve out or some sort of consensus opinion from a group of people on how they feel about the housing situation. I'm going to guess that it's going to be either like negative on the housing situation or at the very least mixed. Okay. Maybe people don't like go. Maybe we'll talk to people. Maybe we'll have people in the discussion point who'll say it's not such a big deal. That's fine. That's an opinion. Okay. But what I'm going to ask you to do is actually to back it up with some sort of a personal anecdote. And I'll talk about that in a minute. That basically will, um, provide some color and provide some depth to the story and help prove why people feel the way they do. Okay. So you theme the story around the central prevailing consensus opinion with a declarative sentence in your lead. And I mean, it could be as simple as something like this. Rutgers students say they're pleased with or not pleased with housing on or off campus. Okay. Or perhaps the consensus opinion is more mixed. Rutgers students say they have mixed opinions about housing on or off campus. Okay. Probably it shouldn't be that simplistic. What you want to also do is I like to say that you try to get like an idea and an angle. Okay. So you have students, Rutgers students. Let's say this. Let's say they're not pleased, or it's some Rutgers students, or many. You could say even many, whatever. Say they're not pleased with the housing situation. Okay, maybe I should actually word this to say exactly that. Maybe situation is actually the key word because I want to say that it is actually more than just getting housing or whatever. All right, but anyway, I should know to the housing situation. Sorry that I'm thinking about this. I just thought of this idea and picked it, so kind of like go, you're seeing the sausage being made here, okay? Um, not pleased with the housing situation. Okay. Hold on one. Okay. All right. Um, all right. So anyway, let's go back to where we were. Um, yeah, not that. Okay. Um, on or off campus. And this is what I like to say. This is when you try, this is really like how you try to formulate the best lead. And I try to like build these teaching lessons in stages and basically give you the idea of what a lead is first, and then I get a little more specific on how to craft it. So this is essentially the main idea, let's say. It doesn't have to be this, okay? Um, but you want to try to get a little bit of an angle to that, makes it a little sharper, because even though this is maybe like an interesting and unique story, it could be even more unique. Saying the um let's say the I don't know, not situation because we already used that word, but saying the I want to say program. I'm sorry, students say they're not pleased with the housing situation on our campus, saying the process is complicated and troublesome. Okay. All right. Just like that. Something general that kind of illuminates what the entire story will say. Okay. All right. Now, we touched on this a little bit in our reading, and some of this we also touched on in chapters 7, 9, and 10. And 10, we dealt with a little bit like with the indirect quoting. But again, when you're actually writing a story and you're reporting a story first and then writing it, you really rely on what they call essentially the book calls indirect quotes. That's paraphrasing. Okay. So what I want you guys to do, and please listen to this, this is important, and I'll probably be talking about it on papers and the whole thing. But many news stories are actually start with a lead, and then especially like with breaking news stories, like police news stories, that sort of thing. We talked about transitions. They have make one point to break down the lead into smaller points. Remember the inverted pyramid and how it did that with a traffic accident, broke down points into smaller points to back up the larger lead. Those are called transitions. Okay, you transition from one point to the next. Okay. Sometimes when you get like a fuller story, though, like this one, that's not necessarily a breaking news story, but it's a fuller story. And feature stories are much like this too. We'll be talking about that. More like human interest stories. You can get a little more, you can provide a little more depth. Okay. You can provide essentially like some sort of maybe personal story, a small story within the story. Okay. And they usually follow the transitions, and that's called an anecdote. Okay. All right. Maybe sometimes there's like not just one anecdote, maybe there's two in a row. Okay. but they typically follow the transition. So you go lead, transition, anecdote. You might even have like two anecdotes in a row. Sometimes that happens. Okay. This is the best type of reporting right here. This is the part of the story that really makes it relatable to people. Okay. This is really where I want you guys to really work hard at because it's something I'm gonna probably be like drum beating like throughout this short semester. And that is the ability to actually like tell a story, be a storyteller and not a stenographer. That means writing in your own words, paraphrasing, and describing little stories that help illuminate the larger story, okay? So let's say that this is the lead right here in this particular story. This is the kind of story, it's not a breaking news story, like I said, where you can actually like have that kind of depth. So you come in, what you want to do is you want to break this into like smaller parts that back up the lead and answers to the questions left by the lead. Okay, so you can almost like phrase this lead like this. Why do Rutgers students say they're not pleased with the housing situation, blah blah blah, and like that. You could do that. And what each transition does essentially answers those questions, okay? And a lot of times you can start something like some Rutgers. You could pick out some of those students you've interviewed, Rutgers students. Maybe the first thing I would probably think about is actually say it's hard. That's why I say like getting housing is it's actually more of a smaller part of the larger story. That's why I rephrase that assignment entry. Get housing. Okay. All right. So maybe that could be like one problem you experience, okay, on or off campus. I know of a lot of students who have had trouble getting off-campus housing as well, or at least affordable. Getting maybe we can even add that, okay? So that's one of the problems it identifies that backs up the lead. It breaks it into smaller parts. It breaks down the lead, okay? All right, so the anecdote, okay? A lot of times people make the mistake of doing like a really long quote, okay? I can't stand it. It's so hard to get on the website and have to hit what's the word they use? Refresh. I find myself missing lunch. Then I have a lot of homework to do, and then I lose touch with the housing. I have people who feel, and that's fine. I understand this is a learning process. I'm not trying to mock people, but I'm just saying that they feel like they need to kind of like write exactly what the person says they're interviewing. And then that's kind of, and I hate to use this term, but that's kind of a lazy form of writing. It really is. I mean, you might as well, you're not even really writing. All you're doing is quoting. All you're doing is taking what they're saying out of their mouth and slapping it on the page. Good writing takes that and makes it into something that's actually more readable. And you have to do that by paraphrasing. Remember what I said, listen, internalize, and write, summarize. Okay. Um, Maybe you take a part out of this and you make that into a quote. A direct quote should be something that's like emotional, something that's colorful or something like that. And so far, like what I'm seeing is maybe I can't stand it would be that. Okay. But you want to have something like, but let's save that for later. Okay. So maybe we'll take that part out for now. Okay. And what we do is we take this direct quote and turn it into something that's a paraphrased anecdote. Paraphrase, please paraphrase, please paraphrase. I mean, I have to say this now because I'm going to be saying it repeatedly on papers probably throughout the semester. Okay. So, John Brown. And then what you could do is by paraphrasing, you can actually cut down on the amounts of words you use. You can notice that quote is like kind of meandering. You get more succinct. Use periods so you can actually like cut down on the things that are being said so it's not like a run-on sentence. Okay. You can write better than the way people talk. Okay. John Brown said it's hard to deal. with the website. You probably just say period right after that. I mean, that's just a declarative statement. He said he hits refresh and gets nowhere. Okay. See, what we're doing is we're describing a little story within a story that backs up the larger story. Okay. As a result, he misses lunch and homework because of, you know, the work involved, or something like that, you know. See, that's probably like, I don't know, how many words was that last one, actually? Let's see. John Brown says, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Actually gonna try to see if like how many words I actually cut out of that. Okay. All right. So let's go to the, oh, anyway, I probably cut about like a good like 10 words off of that. Okay. So, and then what I did was I was able to take part of that that's actually colorful. I was actually like, I could even make like actually like new paragraphs, give people a chance to pause and actually rest a little bit before they go on to the next thought. And then you take this, the colorful part, say, I can't stand it, Brown said. And what that does is kind of like highlights something that's colorful, makes it humanizes the story, that sort of thing. So you pull it out of there and you have something that's much more readable. John Brown said it's hard to deal with the website, or the housing website, I should say, I guess. He said he hits refresh and gets nowhere. I mean, that's probably something a lot of you have to deal with. You have to kind of like go through the whole thing. Just like when you're signing up for courses, you hit refresh and get nowhere. As a result, he misses lunch and homework because of the work involved. I can't stand it, Brown said. Doesn't that, you think that reads better than that meandering direct quote that we had? So that's essentially like an anecdote, okay? Basically, it's some sort of paraphrase little story within the larger story, okay? Then you go to the next transition. I mean, like I said, maybe there's another anecdote you can get in here. You don't have to necessarily follow this letter to letter, but you basically sometimes it's good to maybe get another anecdote. Maybe say something. Maybe there's another reason why people were like frustrated. Another student said about Tim Jones, said he's been forced to pay high rents off campus because he's never been successful with the website. Okay. All right. Now maybe a new transition. Okay. Others, that could maybe like maybe we go to off-campus housing at this point. Others say they've tried to go off campus but find even more difficulty. So you go to some new point that backs up the larger point. Okay. Um, red, haha, um, said he's explored housing opportunities online and always loses out. See, again, I'm paraphrasing. I'm taking like essentially like um just give me 1 second here. I'm actually doing okay. Just 1 second here. If you could give me 1 second. So anyway, so that's anyway, so anyway, Fred Rez said he's explored housing opportunities, always loses out. Um, he ends up at home and he can't afford the rent or something. Rents, or something like that. He has to drive like a half an hour or something like that. Okay. See, there's not a lot of direct quoting going on here. It's just like writing, just basically taking what people are saying and writing. Okay. And one thing I didn't really emphasize here is actually enough is that I saw that a bunch of you wrote like conclusions to like the first stories here. A lot of times that news story actually ends, it's actually really transition, anecdote, and then maybe a direct quote is actually the after the lead is actually the process, and then you repeat it. Okay, is actually the process you follow. And usually, like typical news story ends with just a direct quote. They call it a walk-off quote, a way to say goodbye, that sort of thing. Um, so anyway, that's actually like how you typically end a story. A story is actually supposed to just kind of dwindle out. It's not supposed to actually if you actually have some sort of conclusion or something like that. It's like, well, why isn't this stuff higher? That's the first thing you think about because the most important stuff is actually high. You also want to avoid repetition, and a conclusion typically repeats what's already been said. It just sums up everything that's been said. That's actually the purpose of the lead. The lead is actually supposed to be doing that. The lead is actually supposed to be um actually summing up everything. That's why they call it a summary lead typically. Okay. All right. So that's how you follow that story. That's how you go about that story. Okay. You have a week to do it. Okay. It'll be due Friday, June 13th. Okay. Um, all right. Uh, yeah. So anyway, um, all right. So let's see here. Here's an example of a reaction story that's actually worked. I mean, I don't have a housing example just yet. Maybe if I do get one, I'll send it out and if with that person's approval. Okay. So, like I said, this one's actually about tuition increases and how they had to deal with it at the time. Rutgers students are angered by tuition increases, by the tuition raises the school is implementing, saying they don't see any changes happening around them worth the money. So there's your main idea there. The students you talk to basically are all upset about it. Okay. Sometimes you get a mixed opinion. Sometimes people say like, oh, well, maybe they need money for school. And then like maybe some overall idea why they feel that way, the angle, okay? A few groups of students say now this is actually a transition, okay? A few groups or some students say that with low with how expensive the economy is at the moment, tuition will go up, but they feel the extra money should go towards fixing issues students have to deal with. So basically, one of the first issues is they don't see the money like going anywhere useful. They have to pay for stuff and it doesn't go anywhere useful. Okay. It's like older people complaining about taxes. That's my tax money. I have my taxpayer dollars. Um, Sydney Adetella, as I say, an incoming junior at Rutgers University, was not surprised by the tuition increase, but was stressing the extra money she pays goes towards improving student housing. Hey, about that? That could be another angle to your story. Or another detail or anecdote in your story. She is spending so much money on tuition and housing, but does not believe the housing she was living was worth the money. So that's another good anecdote to think about. Like, you're living in these freaking places that are like kind of hot. Maybe all of them don't have air conditioning and that sort of thing. I saw that was actually another idea I saw, but I thought that like, that could be like lumped in with the housing. Is that not just the air conditioning in the classrooms, but the air conditioning in the housing? I don't think all dorms have air conditioning, do they? And then you come up with a direct quote. It's actually kind of colorful. For 3 months last year, my entire floor had to use one shower stall because the other one was clogged with water. Okay, ew, gross. Other students are stressed about how they will afford their tuition because of the increase. So now we go from essentially the bang for your buck to essentially how they're going to be able to afford it. Okay. Um, Lily Maxwell, see, all paraphrased here. A student at Rutgers pays for school herself. Tuition is another stress factor for her. She is also focused on working to pay it off. It doesn't have time for extracurricular activities. Little free time she has between work and school, she used to spend with her friends. But with the increase, and that's actually you have to have more shifts. That's always comes up with tuition increases is the job. you know. So you can see it goes through that whole lead, transition, anecdote, and direct quote process that I talked about already. Okay. All right. So yes, 500 words. And then I provide that essentially that this is essentially the most specific I'll be getting as in terms of like how a news story should be structured. I've already talked about the inverted pyramid. I've talked about like, how despite all this structure here, you're still answering questions who, what, where, why, how, when. In fact, these transitions provide essentially, like I said, answers to a question that might be posed by the lead. And they answer those who, what, why, what, and questions. Okay. What is it about? Why are we doing this? Okay. How do you feel? Another transition answers those who, what, why, when, where, what questions. Okay. All right. Um, just going over my notes here. Okay. So you'll be seeing this. This will be posted and everything. Everything. Again, actually to the housing situation on or off campus. As the discussion point. This is the discussion point. Like I said, I'll be posting this right after the video. How do you feel about the on-campus and off-campus housing situation at Rutgers? And please provide your opinion as well as an anecdote. So just don't say like it sucks, okay? Provide like the personal story within a story that I just showed you before. That's an anecdote, okay? Let's help everybody build the story, okay? Um, all right, and of course, please put your name there. I mean, let's put your name attached to the story. No need for anonymous people here. Okay, it's not something that's going to get you into trouble or anything like that. Okay, it's not going to be published anywhere. All right, so what's due today? Friday, rewrite of the profile assignment. Okay, and of course the leads worksheet assignment. I'll be talking more about that in Monday's lecture because that by that point I'll have actually graded them and seen them. Just please remember what I talked about there. Try to understand really the difference between a headline and a lead. A lead is essentially is a full sentence, okay, that has the main idea, and I just showed you like, typically it has actually an idea and an angle in it or something. So please go with like the biggest, newest thing in each of them, maybe even the biggest, newest thing to learn that might actually surprise them, okay? Um, all right. And oh yes, I haven't changed this yet. Sorry about that. Boy, I'm glad I caught that. Reaction to the housing situation. Whoa. Okay. Nice one, Tom. Okay. What can I tell you? It's early. Anyway. Um, let's see, leads work. I discussed it and provided, yes, a little idea how to approach it. I discussed how the new assignment, you should get a consensus opinion. Again, mixed opinions could be like, there could be some people who actually feel like indifferent about the housing or feel like it's okay enough. They have actually built new housing on campus and it's actually gotten a little better. They have improved some of the infrastructure here. There's a discussion point that we talk about, and of course, the specific structure and essentially outline of how a news story should follow. Okay. Um, all right. So also to do today, obviously, is the rewrite of the profile assignment, but then I'll also be posting the rewrite of the leads worksheet assignment. Yes, you get a chance to rewrite it after I grade it this weekend. Okay, you get a chance to actually like take those leads and rewrite them. Okay, and then, but you'll see it when actually they start coming in. I start graded them. I haven't graded them any of them yet. Um, all right. So, but today is actually the last day. We'll be talking about the rewrite of and I want to go over that one last time. We had another student basically was gracious enough to provide an example. And actually, this story I actually like kind of edited it a little bit because I felt like some of the most important stuff was actually kind of a little bit low in the story. Um, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce this name. It's my fault, not the person's. But Arcana Balagapul, I'm sorry, an infection control specialist in South Jersey is determined to change the way hospitals approach controlling hospital acquired infections. So, all right, so this is a good lead, even though hospitals said twice, but basically it's unique. Okay, especially in South Jersey, you don't usually hear about that a lot. I'm sorry, I'm technically from South Jersey, so maybe I could say that, but one of the poorest counties. So we wanted to get into like exactly what is she doing to actually prevent those infections. So just try to keep that in mind. In one of the poorest counties in New Jersey, Cumberland County, the importance of public health isn't widely known. However, I'm sorry, uses her expertise in microbiology to face critical issues. Okay, good. And of course, she said it's good to have attribution to source. She collects a series of interviews with patients, staff, and dietary personnel in a particular unit affected by an infectious outbreak. I mean, I just talked about having like good quotes. I didn't make a big deal about that in the first assignment. This is probably, um, this is actually kind of almost like borderline long, but it's got some good color in it. You can think of myself as a private investigator. It is not enough to know which bacteria is present. We need to know why they are there in the first place. Okay, it has like a certain sense of urgency to it. The whole private investigator angle to it, that quote is actually good because it's actually a little colorful. So we're getting more into like what she's got to do to actually like conquer this disease and that sort of and address it and study it. She also bridges the gap between science and human behavior and translate this into universal protocols for hospital staff to understand. More about what she does when Inspira Hospital notices a similar outbreak escalating. She launches an in-depth investigation on the unit involved in the outbreak, and the parents and the patient submitted. Action must be taken, however. Okay, so basically, it's there's no veering off into. She also likes to play football, or she also likes to like play frisbee or something like that. There's no veering off into other things about her. This is actually very important and urgent. Okay, and recently, okay, recent enough, I guess. It's a little bit lower in the story, but she helped reduce the spread of the central line associated bloodstream infections. I think it's all actually all supposed to be capitalized, or maybe not capitalized, or uppercase, by implementing educational tools for staff. Um, Number of nurses in the ICU were given training and strict protocols. This reducing a drop in cases, and she also focuses her efforts on lesser known outbreaks. So after we get through this whole typical disease and everything, I mean, there's also other stuff that she does. And then we get into the background. She began her career as a microbiologist while working in that stuff that happened a long time ago. I found some stuff I felt was a little bit buried in here, but this is how I fixed it. Okay. All right. All right. Just to go over, again, chapter 10 is actually the chapter. So I talked a little bit about the like I said, I talked a little bit about um the rewrite of the profile assignment. I talked a little bit about what's expected of the and of the leads worksheets, but I talked extensively about the new assignment and everything. And again, looking at let's go back to that a little bit. And I mean, a lot of this is covered in the book, and I actually went over this already. But again, this is a matter of like taking the quotations you get and basically doing indirect quotations. Oops. Hold on a second. Okay. Yes, thank you. Yeah, making sure everything's attributed. We talked about that. And I'm sorry, I'm not sure exactly why. Okay. When to use direct quotations. Reporters use direct quotations when their sources say something important or controversial or state their ideas in a colorful manner. The best quotations are often short and full of emotion. A story about a herpetologist included this quotation. I've caught over 1,000 rattlesnakes in Nebraska and I liked every one. I can't say same about the people I want. Okay. So not necessarily the most substantive quote, but it's actually a good, colorful quote, like the way people talk. That's when you use actually like direct quotes. Okay. Very important to know that because this essentially is writing. Okay. Um, all right. When to use indirect quotations. Some sources are more quotable than others, but even colorful sources sometimes say dull things. Porters say it may be tempted to use whatever quotations happen to be available. Yes, it's a big temptation. But a weak quotation is worse than none. If a quotation bores or confuses people, many people will stop reading, listening, or watching. Because actually, you'll even like jump over direct quotes a lot because they feel like it's almost a sign saying this isn't necessarily important to the story, but if you want to read it, it's something colorful. That's the message you're sending off. Reporters use indirect quotes when sources fail to state their ideas more effectively, or they basically like to phrase it themselves. Through paraphrase, indirect quotations allow reporters to rephrase sources' remarks and state them more clearly and concisely. Journalists can also emphasize the source's most significant comments and revise or eliminate ones that are unclear, irrelevant, libelous, pretentious, or otherwise unprintable. Okay. All right. So that's it. So like I said, we'll be following up on this on Monday, this assignment, how you're doing, this sort of thing, what to look for. I'll probably be talking, like I said, I'll probably be spending a lot of the Monday getting into the leads, okay, and the ones that I've graded and what to look for the rewrite on that. And the following Friday, I'll be a week from today, I'll be having another lecture that actually deals with um, essentially this, believe it or not, this the second half of the semester. Can you believe it already? And it's going to be a little different than what you're used to. It's actually a story. We're going to get more into the reporting end of things as opposed to the writing. Right now, I'm just trying to teach you how to write these stories only. But now, once you've gotten that down, and I already see like progress in that department. I've seen a lot of good stories, but now I want you to be able to report those stories, and not just like dig for anecdotes, but dig for data, facts, that sort of thing, and how to obtain that. And what I have is actually a guest lecture video that I've actually pre-recorded and edited, and I will be essentially like having that incorporated as part of the lecture. I'll be coming off with an introduction like this, and then essentially like give providing the lecture video with my guest, whose name is Bill Borden. Okay. He's a he actually is an editor at my magazine, and he actually used to work, he's a long time friend of mine. He worked at Reuters as a business agency, that sort of thing. So we'll be talking about that. All right. Well, thanks everybody. And hey, shorter video than usual. Thanks very much. And I'll be talking to you.